I now have the tremendous pleasure to introduce you to our inaugural keynote speaker, Dr. Emma Pérez. Dr. Pérez, it is an honor to have you here today to speak to our doctoral candidates. A triple Bruin, Dr. Emma Pérez earned her undergraduate degree in political science and women's studies and her master's and doctorate in history. She is currently research social scientist at the Southwest Center and professor in the Department of Gender and Women's Studies at the University of Arizona. A prolific writer of both fiction and nonfiction, Dr. Pérez is the author of many novels, an academic monograph, and numerous articles and essays, including the novels Gulf Dreams, published in 1996 and considered one of the first Chicana lesbian novels in print, and Forgetting the Alamo, or Blood Memory, published in 2009 and winner of the Christopher Isherwood Writing Grant in 2009, a finalist for the Lambda Literary Awards in 2010, and the winner of the National Association for Chicano Studies Regional Book Award for Fiction in 2011. Her academic book, The Decolonial Imaginary, Writing Chicanas into History, published in 1999, is a significant work that explores the marginalized history and experiences of Chicanas. In 2020, Dr. Pérez was inducted into the Texas Institute of Letters, a distinguished honor society founded in 1936 to celebrate Texas literature and recognize distinctive literary achievements. Dr. Pérez is considered one of the founding theorists of Chicana feminism. Again, Dr. Pérez, thank you for being here today. It is truly an honor to have you.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Okay. So you made it, you're here. We're all here. I'm so honored and so privileged to be standing here before you today to celebrate you, particularly because UCLA is my alma mater. And I also want to acknowledge once again that as a land-grant institution, UCLA does acknowledge the Gabrieleño Tongva peoples as the traditional caretakers of this region. And we pay our respects to the ancestors, the elders, the relatives and relations, past, present, and emerging. And I also want to begin by thanking, extending my gratitude, rather, to Dean Susan Ettner, who I had the privilege of meeting earlier today, and she's just lovely. Sorry we missed dinner last night. I was watching Shameless with my daughter and having room service because, you know, we just needed to chill together. Thank you to Kristen McKinney also for transportation to the event and just for taking care of so many logistics, as well as Vanya, I believe you're here, and Pérez McDonald, who just was so persistent about organizing logistics. So thank you all. I also just want to thank everyone who elected to bring me, a brown, genderqueer historian, fiction writer, to speak to you today and hopefully offer a few snippets of inspiration. So for me, returning to this campus today to honor you and celebrate you reminds me of those years when I attended classes. This kind of sweet nostalgia overcomes me. And I remember that while on this campus, I felt strengthened in ways that I never felt before. UCLA was basically my haven in the 70s, in the late 70s and going into the 90s. I met some of the most talented people I'd ever know, whether professors, fellow students, or staff who helped facilitate my journey through 3 different degrees. And I have to say, the most difficult one, of course, was my PhD. And I think all of you here who are receiving your PhDs certainly know that it is not an easy task. The journey itself demands rigor, it demands discipline, a lot of positive affirmation, a lot of self-talk, right? Positive self-talk, a little bit of negative self-talk, but you got to get over that. And although I graduated with my PhD 35 years ago, I don't believe the rigors have changed that much. One of the questions that I'm asked consistently, and I'm sure you're familiar with this question, and that is, why did you select your field of study? So my response dates back to an undergraduate class that I had when I was an undergrad here. And that is when I learned that there were only 3 Chicanas with PhDs in history in the world, in the universe, in the nation. So at the time, I really was not at all interested in studying history. But when I read the only essay that was assigned in women's history class about my community, I began to think differently. In the article, which was titled, by the way, The Mexican Peon Women of Texas, and it was published in the 1920s, and the sociologist in the article claimed that Mexican women were passive and followed men. So wherever they were commanded to, which was mostly labor, to labor in cotton fields and other agricultural work. Well, I come from a family of incredibly strong, courageous women. My grandmother, my mother, my sisters, my aunts, my cousins. And as a kid of 8 and 9, I also was in those cotton fields with the women of my family, all of whom did what they had to do to support their family. And they did it with confidence. So you can see why that little essay from the 1920s would make me so angry. It gave me no choice. I had to make a commitment to research and to research the lives of Chicanas and Latinas who felt the same way. And so I was fortunate enough, rather, to meet a number of Chicanas and Latinas who felt the same way that I did, and subsequently we did help each other complete our dissertations in the 1980s, and we became the first of a handful of Chicana and Chicanx historians at that time. And we're pleased that now there are over 100 Chicanas and Chicanx in the profession of history. So I'm not telling you this because I'm unique. I'm not telling you this because I pulled myself up from my bootstraps. As you well know, that's a pretty ludicrous, if you imagine it, it's ludicrous if not impossible to do. What I do know is that none of us would be here without our communities, without our families, without our friends who become our family, without our partners, our spouses, our children, all of whom assisted in some way. Now, and this observation does not negate your accomplishments, because your will, your willingness, and your convictions have brought you here. And I'm sure someone or many someones stood beside you. And I suspect that you're grateful to your steadfast family and friends. And I want to acknowledge those who are here with you today, as well as those who are with you in spirit. All of you who are sitting here and have arrived to be with your PhD graduates. We acknowledge you and your spirit as well, and the fact that you gave as family members, as friends, as mentors, as mentees, as spirit guides. You all deserve recognition. So I think what is also something that your generation knows is that, and you're fully aware, is that we're living at a time of many adversities in the early 21st century. You've inherited too many challenges. When young people say to me, this world is going to end, why bother with social change? Why bother with political activism? Why bother with protests? My response is yes, the world is going to change, is going to end. The world is going to end, but it's not going to end today. It's not going to end tomorrow. Hopefully it won't end next week or next year. And here's the thing, and having studied history, I know that the world has experienced trials and tribulations. We have to remember that 60 million indigenous people were massacred from 1500 to 1600. And yet indigenous folks of numerous nations thrive today. From the 15th to the 19th centuries, the transatlantic slave trade killed over 60 million Black people. In the 19th century, Chinese immigrants suffered at the hands of racists who only wanted their labor and not their personhood. In the 1830s and 1840s, the US invaded Mexico and Mexicans became second-class citizens, while borders between families continued to be enforced. Lynchings of brown and Black people were common, more common than we'd like to think. During World War II, Japanese Americans were imprisoned in detention camps. So, and there are many more inequities, and yet still we're here today, thriving and transforming and contributing and changing society. Now, these are the facts that the far right refuses to acknowledge. They refuse to acknowledge as facts, and instead, politicians and their fearful constituents have been removing history texts from classrooms and from libraries. They're on a mission to censor our history. They're on a mission to censor our literature. They're on a mission to censor our many voices and perspectives. So why the rampant censorship? What is that about? Because learning the complexities of our past means we develop understanding and compassion for each other. One of the favorite classes that I get to teach now is called Writing Queer Autohistoria, which is basically a memoir class. Now, I love to teach that class because students share their personal stories. They find their voices to impart often difficult moments from their own past and moments they've survived. So when they share their voices, they become vulnerable, they become compassionate, they become kind. They become progenitors of a future that holds hope for a better, healthier world for everyone. They begin to believe in a future not driven by greed, not driven by fear, not driven by hate for queers and trans folks or anyone who's different, including neurodivergent folks who we've finally begun to pay more attention to. Now, so you who are here today are the forerunners of a future not for you alone, but for your children, if you have them or if you plan to have them, for your nieces and nephews, for your friends' kids, for the next generations that deserve your respect and attention. Indigenous prophets speak to the 7 generations that will carry on after us, and that it's up to us to care for this earth and all sentient beings. So how do we do that? I believe we sustain a sense of hope, whether it's cautionary hope or tricky hope or enduring hope. We simply choose it. Abolition feminists have asked us to consider hope and to bear in mind that hope is a discipline. And all of you here today know what discipline is, having come this far. So today's ceremony represents the culmination of a long, arduous quest, a quest that demonstrates resilience and hope. So I truly believe that you're warriors, prepared to fight for the generations to come. And after today's rather long afternoon of anointments and appreciation, I'm ordering you to go get crazy, to have fun. Responsible, safe fun, okay? Don't do what I did and wake up in places that, you don't remember. But so be responsible and have fun nonetheless. Go shout, go scream, go sing, go dance. Feel passion, feel zest. Be wild enough to recognize that life is a wondrous adventure. And you're on that adventure. You're living out loud and you're living a life of integrity. Living a life that doesn't fear and ventures boldly into the future. This is your day. Go on your journey with promise in your back pocket and hope in your heart. Even on days when you just can't get out of bed because another virus has struck, or fires and hurricanes are whipping the environment, or the threat of World War III lingers above us. Whatever the challenge is, remember your ancestors. Remember their spirit. Remember they are still with you. Remember to choose the discipline of hope. And always, always, always be kind. Always be generous to yourself and to others. And most of all, be your true, authentic selves. So I want to read a quote from my favorite Nobel Prize writer, Toni Morrison. And she said, "There's no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal. I know the world is bruised and bleeding, and though it is important not to ignore its pain, it is also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. Like failure, chaos contains information that can lead to knowledge, even wisdom, like art. And so I will end by saying to you, You are the art form that you have constructed with knowledge and wisdom during your time at UCLA. You will continue to create with your beauty, with your wit, and with your resilience. Thank you, thank you, thank you for having me here today.
I just want to say one more time, thank you so much to our inaugural speaker, Dr. Emma Pérez. That was wonderful, and we so much appreciate, your spending the time to come here and share your perspectives with us. And we will catch that dinner later.